Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, I had to actually think about it if it was morning or noon. I'm just having my coffee now. It's the beauty and excitement of conferences is you're running around talking to so many wonderful people you forget it. You probably don't need caffeine. Everyone seems to do it. Good afternoon. Welcome to session 7 of the CSJ Center Symposium, Creating a Healthier Los Angeles, Improving Transportation and Reclaiming Green Spaces. And I'm pleased to welcome Professor Jeff Thies, Director of the Institute for Business Ethics and Sustainability at the LMU College of Business Administration. Okay, this one.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. I direct the Institute for Business Ethics and Sustainability, and one of the great gifts of the Institute and kind of secrets of the Institute is that our work is really advanced and supported by our student workers who really bring not just passion to the work, but vision and guidance and real partnership and collaboration. One expression of that is that every year we ask the students to create a session as part of our co-curricular programming around sustainability. And this session came from that. And as they were developing it, it was so clear that it fit the theme of the CSJ annual symposium. And we, every year, work to bring programming to the CSJ Symposium, so this was just a perfect fit for that. So I want to thank them and introduce and name those students and their leadership in developing the program today. They will facilitate the program, introduce our panelists, etc., but I really want to recognize them. So the first is Lily Sagra, Chloe Dulage, Maya Schwartz, and Marianis. And then also the two who will be facilitating for us today, Isabella Zadoya and Guillaume Racinia. And so please welcome them.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for the introduction. Hi, everybody. My name is Isabella Zadoyan.
My name is Guillaume Racinia.
And we are the student facilitators for this panel, Creating a Healthier Los Angeles, Improving Transportation and Reclaiming Green Space. This panel, like Jeff said, was inspired by the student staff at LMU's Business Ethics and Sustainability Office, and we're really excited to have all these presenters come be here with us today to give their expertise in this subject matter. With the Los Angeles Olympics coming in 2028, the Super Bowl being here in next year, and with the FIFA World Cup, it's really important that we have improving our transportation to accommodate these events, and that we have permanent infrastructure to maintain the sustainability and health of Los Angeles.
Expanding green spaces provides residents with more opportunities for recreation while also balancing ecosystems and improving air quality. Channelizing the LA River, turning it into a straight concrete channel, and the culture of personal vehicles have weakened Los Angeles' ecological and public health resilience. This panel will inform the audience on how the revitalization of the river, sustainable transit, and green infrastructure can promote a healthier city. Together, these topics reflect the complex interconnectivity of Los Angeles' environmental history and underscore how essential collaborative, innovative solutions are for the city's future. We are very excited to have these panelists share their expertise on the subject.
Our first speaker is going to be Dr. Eric Strauss.
Yeah.
Dr. Strauss is the President's Professor of Biology at LMU and Executive Director of the LMU Center for Urban Resilience, also known as CURES. His collaborative research includes animal behavior, endangered species management, and urban ecosystems in science education. He's the senior editor of a web-based peer-reviewed journal, Cities in the Environment, and has co-written multimedia textbooks in biology and urban ecology, as well as hosted multiple video series on the life sciences. Dr. Strauss previously taught at Tufts University, the University of Massachusetts Boston, and Boston College. Please.
Welcome, Dr. Strauss.
Thank you and good morning. It's a delight to kick this off, and thank you so much for being here. I'm going to take the next 10 minutes and advocate for trees in urban settings. We've gone through a terrible set of wildfires here in Los Angeles, and trees have gotten kind of a bad rap, and they shouldn't. because trees are absolutely essential for healthy urban ecosystems. And in fact, properly arrayed, they actually reduce the risk of ember movement and can actually suppress fire. That's not what you're hearing right now. And so we need to kind of reset our understanding. First of all, we need to understand the impact that we have as humans. I included this, it was a paper that was published in Nature about 5 years ago. And the extraordinary thing is that if we add up the way that all the stuff that we've produced as humans, it outweighs all of the biomass that nature has produced. I mean, it's staggering to think of our role as ecosystem engineers is so extraordinary that we have built more stuff than nature has built. And so I present that as a neutral statement, not as an apologia, but instead to think of the role that we play as humans in deciding the future fate of the Earth, and especially in those high-density areas where now almost 80% of the developed world live in cities and more than half of the world's population. You've heard the phrase sustainable cities, and we're going to hear a lot about that today, especially with a focus on Los Angeles. And when we think about sustainability, it's really requiring 3 parts. And that's the cool thing about doing interdisciplinary science. It's one of the really cool things, opportunities you have as students being here at LMU, because we talk about the education of the whole person and the need to create these interdisciplinary, broad-based understandings. So sustainable cities require social, economic, and environmental sustainability, which is both bearable, equitable, and viable. And when we bring those components together, we enhance the resilience and we get closer to this notion of sustainability. And I'm here to argue today that trees are the best multitaskers that we have in nature to help us achieve those outcomes, because they work in all 3 domains. When we think about the ecological value of trees, they improve water quality by capturing rainwater, by filtering rainwater, by gently allowing the water to re-enter the underground aquifers. They reduce stormwater runoff, and you see here rain gardens in the city of Baltimore, which is one of the intensively studied cities in the United States, along with Phoenix, for studying urban ecology. They reduce the heat island effect, the temperature that is hotter in cities than the surrounding rural ecosystem as a result of all the mechanical work that we do in cities and the dark surfaces that we have that absorb heat. Cities can be 10 to 15 degrees hotter than just 3 miles outside the city. Hot enough to create their own weather. And trees can disrupt that process and reduce the temperature. They filter air pollutants, both metabolically and physically. Take a look at a leaf sometime closely and see those waxes and hairs on the leaf. You're capturing pollutants directly out of the air that improve the quality of the air that we breathe. They store carbon. They sequester carbon. They're built from carbon dioxide. And as long as we don't burn the trees, even if we cut them down and use them for construction, that carbon is sequestered and taken out of the atmosphere. They increase the habitat not only for humans, but for the other animals and plants that we share our ecosystems with. And the sharing of that ecosystem is critical, because we can then rely on ecosystem services, which are the things that nature does to protect our health. And when those systems fail, we have to introduce technical solutions. And we're good at technical solutions. We put 3 people in a station and sent them to the moon and back. That was a pretty inhospitable place to live. But the cost of having entirely industrialized technical solutions is so high that we'll leave most of the world out. Most of the world is totally reliant on ecosystem services. So here's a little bit of data from Mateo's work in 2006, looking at the decrease from baseline in various measures of quality: sediment, nitrogen, phosphorus, runoff, huge improvements affiliated with trees. Here we talk about stormwater runoff in different cities that vary dramatically in the amount of annual rainfall they receive, from as little as 6 inches in Glendale, Arizona, to as much as 41 inches in New York City. And you look at the intercept per tree, a minimum of 360 gallons per tree in Glendale, up to 2,000 gallons per tree in Cheyenne, Wyoming. This is water that would otherwise be lost to the ecosystem, and we would have to bring it in from remote locations. We see that in Los Angeles. Typical water molecule coming out of your tap has traveled at least 400 miles and maybe more to get to your cup. Dave Nowak, who is arguably the most famous scientist in studying the value of trees, in one of his early papers looking at Baltimore, that the trees in Baltimore are intercepting over 700 tons of air pollution per year that's not entering our lungs or having to be cleaned by physical, technical structures. The trees in Baltimore were also found to take up about 11,000 tons of carbon and store 500,000 tons of carbon in total. Again, not requiring scrubbers or other technical solutions to remove that carbon. Urban trees have tremendous social benefits. They lower the asthma rates. It's a very complex system. We don't exactly know all the pathways that they do. One of it is, of course, to intercept pollution. But asthma, which is a growing problem in the inner city, especially in underserved neighborhoods, has a complex etiology that involves air quality, it involves stress, it involves diet, it involves social risk. All of these factors can increase the risk of asthma, and trees intercept these problems at multiple levels. Trees reduce crime, because when you put trees in an environment, people spend more time outside. And when there are more people spending time outside, the tension in the community drops, violence drops, and crime drops, for a whole variety of reasons. It's also been found that people who can see trees from their window in a hospital require less pain medication and have quicker recovery from surgery. Probably related to the innate built-in desire we have for the color spectrum that's produced by trees as the light dabbles through the leaves. People have more opportunity to interact with nature, which connects them back to the rational role of science and to the role of art and enjoyment. Increased social interactions when people are outside in nature. Typically they're not alone, and they're discovering that the people around them are fun to be with and not people to be afraid of. One of the most important long-term studies done by Austin Troy, a colleague of mine, published for his doctoral work back in 2012, found that in Baltimore there was a 10% increase in tree canopy was associated with roughly 12% decrease in crime. So as you add more trees, crime goes down. Fascinating relationship. In Chicago, researchers have found that areas with increased trees and other vegetation can have fewer instances of domestic violence and lower levels of attention deficit disorder in children living there. A famous study of Poe and Sullivan in the early 2000s did work in underserved neighborhoods and looking at those neighborhoods that were greener, were healthier. I have to tell you a quick story. So about 5 years ago, I was sitting on an airplane, and I'm headed off to a conference, and there's somebody sitting next to me, and that paper was out, the person was scrolling through the paper, and I said, "Isn't that a fantastic paper?" I said, "I use it in my class." Turned out it was Bill Sullivan. It was his paper. And I was so excited. I said, "Would you just sign that and give me a copy of it?" They're also related to economic values of trees. In other words, our perception of the value of trees. Real estate values increase, and some of that's affiliated with the avoided costs of crime and hospitalizations, but trees directly contribute to the green economy and the potential economic benefits of agroforestry, especially in urban areas. Because obviously trees are not free, trees are expensive to maintain. But the differential to the positive is huge. So here's just an example from some of Nowak's work looking at different cities, looking at the benefit per tree just in stormwater management. And so in some cities like New York, it's $30 million annually that are values to the city controlling stormwater. That's just an introduction. I hope we're going to have more to talk about as we hear from our other speakers and as we open up for questions.
I would like to welcome our next speaker, John Petrie. John Petrie is an assistant professor in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department here at LMU. Prior to joining LMU, he was a senior hydraulic engineer at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in the LA District. Professor Petrie is a registered professional engineer with expertise in flow and sediment dynamics in rivers, hydraulic modeling, and water resources engineering. His recent work focuses on ecosystem restoration and flood risk management in urban environments, and his contributions to teaching and scholarship have been recognized, including receiving the Leon Luck Faculty Award for the most effective professor from the CEE department at Washington State. Professor Petrie earned a PhD in civil engineering from Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University. Please welcome him.
Materials, though, it's large cobbles and vegetation is taking hold. And this is a picture just from in. I'm just walking down the bank there, and you can see the that would be the Verdugo Mountains, I think, to the north, and Griffith Park is just to my left. If you continue moving down into downtown, this is one of those things that Waze tells you don't go that route. It does avoid traffic and no tolls, but this is heading into downtown, and it's really easy to get disoriented because you can't really see up above the banks there. So I can't remember exactly where this is. I think it might be the 110 bridge above me, but heading down into downtown, you can see that the channel is entirely encased in concrete. Right? That's kind of the historical historical picture, and for outsiders, that's their picture of the LA River. The first time I ever heard of the LA River was in a graduate geotechnical course, geotechnical engineering course, and the professor asked, who knew about it? Nobody knew anything. And he said, this was, keep in mind, a few years ago, he said, did you ever see a 70s car chase movie? He said, at some point there's a scene where a car jumps into a giant concrete trapezoid and drives around. That's the LA River. And you can see that there. That is at least parts of the LA River. Okay, so just in kind of summary, it's 50 miles wide. It starts from about I think it's the Canoga Park, I'm not sure I'm saying that right, neighborhood of LA, down to the port at Long Beach. The entire river is channelized, so we've engineered all 51 miles, but not the entire section is encased entirely in concrete. There's about this it's probably a 6 to 8 mile section around Griffith Park and Glendale Burbank area where it does have this somewhat naturalized soft bottom. And the flow that you see in pretty much all those pictures that I showed, what we call the base flow, that flow that's in the channel more or less year round. So even in summer months, you can see flow in the LA River, which wouldn't be the case were it not for us, because it's wastewater treatment plant effluent. So if you're thinking of bringing your swim trunks, I'm just going to advise again. Our professional's opinion is don't, but people do. So the other source is urban runoff. So people washing their cars, watering their lawns, things like that. All of that is feeding the flows that we see in the LA River day to day when we haven't had a major rain event. Okay, and this ties into the LA River is kind of an extreme case, but it ties into a larger interest that's of interest, that's becoming more and more of an interest of mine, is that the role that rivers play and how civil engineers and environmental engineers play a role in developing the future of rivers when we're looking at, this UN report says 68% of the world population is going to live in cities by 2050. That's a very large number of people. This continued urbanization and growth is going to continue to put a stress on our rivers. Again, LA Rivers is an extreme case, but I wouldn't be surprised to see more locations moving in that direction. And it's going to become increasingly difficult to either restore or maintain channels that provide some ecological function as we're balancing economics with the ecological needs. And I think and these urban rivers also provide a number of essential services, including this habitat, both riverine and riparian habitat. That's the area next to the river. That's that floodplain that really, for most of the LA River, doesn't exist anymore. But also stormwater and water quality management, which stormwater, actually, LA River does a pretty good job of that right now. Gets the water gone and in a hurry. But in terms of water quality management, there's certainly some improvements. And also, there are opportunities for us to interact with nature as well, as some potential recreation opportunities. And specific to the LA River, why I think it plays a major role and why I initially got involved in this when I was working for the Army Corps of Engineers, my two largest projects were wrestling with this major issue that Southern California and all its development, we've lost the majority of riparian habitat. We've lost basically all of our riverine habitat. And you can see the number, 90 to 95%. And in spite of all of that, the LA River is in its degraded state that it's in right now, is still performing, essential ecosystem functions for 140 federally protected bird species, right? Because this area of Southern California is on the, I'm getting a little out of my element here, so you can correct me afterwards, but the Pacific Flyway, which is the route of migrating birds, this area is an important stopover, so having that habitat is really essential. And the LA River is one of the only places currently that can provide that habitat in Southern California, in the LA metro area. The other thing that's happened is with this channelization, it's divided up habitat regions, and so that traditional habitat connectivity where species can move from one area to the next has been basically blocked off by these large concrete structures. We have a 300-foot wide concrete channel that's got banks of 40 feet or so, right? That's a pretty strong barrier for a lot of species to navigate. Okay, so kind of the overarching challenge that we're facing is really how can we, if they're already maintain rivers, the ecosystem functions of rivers, or how can we, in the case of the LA River, restore them while continuing to reach the benefits. I mean, we didn't channelize it just for fun, right? That's probably, I'm sure that if we look at federal, civil works federal projects, if we put it in today's dollars, I'm sure that's one of the largest that has occurred in Southern California, possibly the nation. So we get, and we've received enormous flood risk management benefits from the LA River, right? We haven't, none of you and I don't think anybody here has been here long enough to see a major flood event on the LA River where it's pouring out of the channels, where there were major fatalities, where there was major property loss. Now there has been smaller events, but nothing on the scale of 1938 has occurred. The closest was 1969. There were fatalities, but not on the LA River. They were up in the area like the Montrose and La Cañada area, with, based on debris flows from the high intensity rainfalls. But the LA River performed pretty well for a major event. So what are some of the challenges when we look at restoring the LA River? Well, I kind of look at this like the challenges of living in LA. Highly developed floodplains, including buildings, roads, railroads, utilities, all of that is right up to the channel, right? Which you don't see, if you've not traveled outside of Los Angeles, I'd encourage you to travel outside of Los Angeles, look at rivers in other places, even other cities, and just see how they're functioning, how are they flowing, what do you see around rivers? That includes, obviously, the high property values, even adjacent to the river, right? Channel maintenance, so this is an engineered structure. It wasn't just built and left there. It has a pretty large annual maintenance budget. And even in the last, I think the last decade or so, Congress has not allotted the funds that have been requested. And so there are some deferred maintenance issues likely present on the river at the moment. Then there's a whole, especially with climate change and our very vulnerable location in the southeast, water availability and an uncertain hydrologic future. Water availability could be that the County of Los Angeles decides no longer to discharge that wastewater effluent into the river. They may decide that they want to divert it into a groundwater recharge basin, which is where a lot of water in LA County ends up. There's a lot of people that would not like to see any water go to the river. They'd like to see it all recharged groundwater so that it can be pumped back up and used for, they call it productive purposes, but it basically means they can sell it back to us, right? Okay, and then one of the major challenges, though, is that any change to the river, since this project was built with federal dollars, so the government is required to give us our money's worth, which I guess is a good thing, right? So we paid for a certain level of protection. We're all incurring a certain risk based on that project living in LA. That risk cannot change, right? Because of the federal investment. So any changes to the current risk must decrease the risk. We cannot increase it. So that's why some people say, well, why can't we just rip out all the concrete, just restore a natural channel? No, because that will definitely not decrease the flood risk. Unfortunately, it would have many beneficial aspects, but that's not one of them. Okay, so just a quick look at a potential future LA River. And this is kind of looking at a reasonable approach to how can we manage all these challenges. And this is kind of summarized mostly from this there's a number of initiatives around the LA River underway. The one that I'm most familiar with is a joint project between the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, a federal entity, and the city of Los Angeles. And this is a major ecosystem restoration project. At last estimate, I think it was a $2.5 to $3 billion project. So major public work project that is looking at ecosystem restoration on a section of the LA River. There's also the third item, which is the LA County's master plan for the river. Every couple of decades, they update the master plan. This got a lot of press a couple of years back. There's a famous architect involved, Frank Gehry, who does beautiful buildings. I'm not sure of his river background after reading this, but it is probably a controversial topic. I'm not going to go there. But I will talk about some feasible things that might happen in roughly the next decade on the LA River. So we've got existing conditions on the left. LA River again can be hard to find, but it's on the lower left. And this is a connection with the, on the right-hand side, this is, I believe the street moving around the park here, I think that's Spring Street, and you've got the Rio de Los Angeles State Park right there on the right-hand side that heads into Chinatown. And so that's directly adjacent to the river. So one possibility is to raise the train tracks, develop some kind of trestling there to allow the wetlands to develop in some way in the park there. So it's really, notice the change to the river is relatively modest, but developing some connectivity between a habitat center and the river. This is kind of a similar idea of a floodplain widening where this, the kind of empty area in the middle, that's what's called Taylor Yard. That's a historic, it's a railroad like maintenance yard that was purchased by the city a few years ago specifically for this project. And the idea being that can become a green space that provides a much more both habitat and recreation opportunities, and is directly connected with at least a portion of the river. And that's so I think if you know the Sotomayor magnet schools, like right there, this is Glassell Park in Frogtown on your right. Find it helps, like LA people, it's like you either need to know neighborhoods or freeways. Like the location on the LA River doesn't matter. It's like so I'm catching up. All right, and this is up around River Parks to your left, stepping back the banks and maybe terracing them. Relatively modest changes to the channel, but again introducing more potential habitat features. The same thing here. This is near the Los Feliz Golf Course. Possibly terracing the banks, and maybe there's a levee here that potentially could be set back. Further studies needed on that one. So that's kind of a quick overview of LA River. I hope I stayed close to 10 minutes, and I hope that you have some questions, I guess, afterwards. And welcome to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pugh, Los Angeles County. Eli is an award-winning advocate who has led campaigns at the local, state, and federal campaign levels to build affordable housing, Measure A, fund public transit operations, Measures R and M, create safer streets, Measure HLA, address climate change, and clean California's toxic air. Eli served as president of the City of Los Angeles' Neighborhood Civil Council Commission for an unprecedented 3 terms and has been honored by the Transit Center and Empowerment Congress for his work in advancing transit and housing justice in Los Angeles. Eli graduated from the University of Pennsylvania, the University of Southern California's Annenberg School for Communications, the London School of Economics and Political Science, and the Coral Lead SoCal program. Please welcome Eli.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I don't have a PowerPoint. I hope that's okay. All right, great. And I was listening to these really fascinating presentations, and I was thinking, I came into this work because of my parents. My dad's actually an oceanographer, and for many years did research. I grew up in Bermuda, and he was doing research there. But he used to tell me these stories of how when he was a graduate student working off of Jacques Cousteau's boat, they would take helicopters and just lower him down into the river to take samples, because that's just what you did in the 70s. So he had some history with limnology and the river ecosystem, as well as some of the things that you were talking about. Young Dad's talking about that. But I'm an advocate. I'm not a professor. I don't have, a doctorate degree. I'm just really here to talk to you about what community organizations like ours are advocating for. I think today's really interesting because it rained really hard last night. I mean, it was great for my sleep, but if you notice from the last talk, it's a working piece of infrastructure that we have, right? All of that water that came down last night is probably now going in Long Beach, right? And so the whole goal is to ensure that our property, our farms, our people are protected. And so how do you take something that's a working piece of infrastructure and really make it something that we can all enjoy and we don't have to go to the men's central jail to be able to see a view of it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but I also was asked to talk about sort of what the business case is a little bit for housing and transportation here in Los Angeles. And I want to make sort of 2 points on that. And I have kind of 2 hypotheses or 2 theses on it. The first is affordability. Let's start there. So we did a poll a couple months ago here in Los Angeles County, because we do polling. We were looking to do a ballot measure this year, and we asked voters, what the biggest, most important problem is to them right now. And 92% of respondents to this poll, said that the cost of living was a serious, very serious problem. And what fascinated me about that poll is we oversampled white homeowners because they're typically more likely to vote. And so seeing a number like that, it blew my mind. It showed to me that it wasn't just low-income workers, or it wasn't just immigrants, or it wasn't just folks struggling to pay the rent, like maybe some students here. It was folks who had property, who had a steady income. We're seeing the cost of living in this region becoming too difficult. And so that really struck me as like an important thing that we have to be thinking about here. And the history of Move LA is really about coalition building. We began our work in 2007.
Sort of like put things together alongside the first 3 presentations, but a couple of them more from like the natural science, and the other one sort of still at the intersection of business and like the NGO or nonprofit work. And now I'm more like addressing just the kind of role of business. But I was to like try to talk about like a kind of collaboration or partnerships between businesses and nonprofit organizations as well as the governments. So glad that none of the 3 speakers brought up this concept, but which I believe so that I feel like I'm making a contribution. But as I was thinking through this topic, I was thinking about the concept of public goods. I think clean air, like public health, like street lights, like tree canopy. To me, those are more like considered like sort of like the public goods. Yeah. But before we get to that, I think we might need to talk about like the 2 main characteristics of public goods. The first one is non-rival, so one person's use doesn't necessarily reduce another's use of the public goods. And the other one is non-excludable, meaning that you can't stop anyone from benefiting of using public goods. So just let me give you an example. Assuming that some companies where someone just cleans the air and everyone breathes that kind of clean air, but you can't, because it's a public good, so you can't exclude anyone. Well, then the question becomes, why would I pay for it? So no one may be willing to pay for it, and that sometimes leads to this kind of market failure of providing good public goods to our society. So that's why typically provision of public goods has been traditionally addressed by governments. But we know that governments cannot do it all. They do have extensive resources, and they do have like lots of influence and everything, and they can set the stage for by setting up some sort of regulations and everything. But budget limits because they have so many issues that they need to pay attention to, and then they need to prioritize across like different like issues. And B, governments are not necessarily also designed to provide public goods, although they are charged to do so, but they sometimes feel like, okay, we are lacking in some of these expertise that we actually need to have. And another one is that providing public goods for the entire society or across like local government, like cities or regions, but you need to scale things up, but they are not, they sometimes lack of that kind of capabilities to scale the actual needs. Like installing like thousands of EV chargers, for instance, sometimes you might need some additional support in addition to the traditional role of the government. So that's why I feel like I wanted to start with the public goods, and then that has been the traditional role of the governments, but governments cannot do it all. So we might probably need to think about how we can like collaborate together across some of the main society actors. So in today's topic, given that I was charged to talk about the role of business, I will try to mention three actors: governments, non-profit, like NGOs, civil society, and businesses. So I think governments, businesses, NGOs, they do have a bit of like different capabilities or different roles, although there might be some overlaps. So governments, I think they set up the regulations so that they sort of reduce the uncertainty among the society actors, and they give some guidance, and that they also set up the institutional infrastructure so that the other society actors can sort of play a role in providing public goods. And NGOs and civil society, they tend to play a role as a kind of checks and balances, like a watchdog, so that they can like monitor what other societal actors do in a positive way, so that everyone sort of is on the right track, and that they sometimes like set up another like standards or accountability, or so like service delivery. And advocacy and mobilization, I think, Move LA has been sort of engaged in the kind of advocacy realm. And businesses, on the other hand, they have that kind of certain industry knowledge, and depending on the types of companies, but a lot of companies have like extensive resources and capabilities, and they also have innovative capabilities. And lots of the companies are designed to sort of like develop some sort of technologies or engage in some innovative activities to gain a competitive advantage. I think that's the kind of nature of business. But one thing that is interesting is that businesses are not necessarily designed to provide public goods. That's something that we need to be aware of. Businesses are designed to achieve organization goals, which is typically like gaining a competitive advantage, like competitive edge, not necessarily provide public goods for our society. But they do they have an approach toward their business goals in a needed way that also public goods need to have. Meaning that like they spot the gaps, like identify some discrepancies, and that they are good at building solutions, and that they move fast, and that they also scale fast. And those are the kind of like the nature of the characteristics that businesses have. I would like to begin with one example, but not necessarily based in Los Angeles, but based in New York City. This is a startup called Airstella. And they developed a really cool technology so basically they developed this compact machine that captures carbon dioxide from air and converts it into synthetic gasoline. So, and then using renewable energy. So on the one hand, they can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, even going beyond the state mandatory requirements. So here again, the government sort of sets the institutional infrastructure by through setting up like the regulations and policies, and the non-profit organization, they convene this partnership so that they sort of like they brought like businesses and the local governments and the other society actors, and businesses they voluntarily set up this kind of like commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Also, they promise to provide some tech support, and they also like make capital investments in building these EV chargers by 2028. And the last one is, as the name sort of represents, this is affiliated with Amazon. And so Bezos Earth Fund, they were teaming up with a Los Angeles-based NGO, which is 3 people. So basically, Bezos Earth Fund provided some like a grant to this NGO, so that this NGO can engage in like a field level project like planting trees. So I think Eric briefly mentioned that like a tree canopy is one of the issues. So across Los Angeles, underserved communities, they tend to have less tree canopy, meaning that they might be more likely to be exposed to like a heat-related illness, and then it could also be associated with the real estate crisis and everything. So 3 people got this grant or sponsorship from the Bezos Earth Fund. So here, the government again, they sort of set the infrastructure and the institution setting, and the NGO was fully charged to engage, run this particular sustainability project by receiving funds from the Bezos Earth Fund, and that here business, which is like affiliated with Amazon, they provided that kind of like needed financial resources to the NGO. So these are the 3 examples that I found, and then also pertinent to today's topic, which is about like making a healthier Los Angeles. So as a business scholar, we tend to prefer to simplify things in a certain framework. So I wanted to give you like some ideas of how businesses then can approach toward like providing public goods via partnerships. So as a business person or as a company, they might need to think about what kind of sustainability project they want to engage in. Because as I just demonstrated, there are different types of projects. So I would say 3 projects. Action-based project, which is more like a kind of field level project as the 3 people has implemented. And then control-based project, they set up some sort of voluntary regulation, although it has a potential risk of being engaged in some sort of greenwashing. But there's another type, and then information-based project. They try to disseminate some sort of information about some sustainability thing, and then like advocacy-related activities, and they can engage in some sort of public opinion activities, like corporate political activity. I would say those are falling under this information-based project. So once businesses determine which kind of sustainability project they want to engage in, then they may need to choose the right partner. Because some NGOs, for instance, Move Los Angeles, I think they are close to more like NGOs with service activities as well as advocacy activities. So once businesses sort of have been determined to engage in certain type of sustainability project, they need to look for the right partner. And the last one is, depending on the relative capability between businesses and NGOs, they might need to think about whether they want to lead the project or whether they want to co-develop the project from the onset or whether they just want to sponsor the project. Like for instance, going back to the 3 people case with Bezos Earth Fund, that NGO had the expertise in running the project, and then the Bezos Earth Fund decided to just sponsor that project. So I think that's a kind of example of the sponsorship. And if they have some sort of relative equal capabilities, they can co-develop the project from the onset. But when businesses believe that I have a strong vision, this is something that is core to our core business activities, and we have the kind of all the resources and capabilities, but we just need a bit of like support from like NGOs or governments, then they might be able to commission the project. So one thing that I wanted to highlight is that traditionally, when it comes to providing public goods, we tend to feel like, oh, that's a kind of government's job or civil society jobs or NGO's job. But depending on whether it is core to their business activities, businesses can take the initiative, and they can make some investments in providing public goods. So that's the kind of main message that I wanted to deliver. Okay, thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to hearing your questions, answering them. Thank you very much.
Of LA could be doing right now to help support any of these efforts that we talked about.
I'll kick it off. First of all, it was wonderful to hear these three presentations. They complemented the four. They complement each other so well. And I think no matter who you are sitting in the audience as a student, it should lit a fire, connected to something you're concerned about. So in this phase of your, professional development, I encourage you to get involved with many different kinds of courses that might feed into this interest that you have, and then make sure that you're participating in research activities and outreach activities through labs and centers that are here throughout the university. And you'll find your place as you begin to learn more about what the opportunities are. And you're entering into a phase of your development where, universities are the places where we can practice things. And we don't always have to get them right, because this is a training ground for where you're going to step into the professional world. And so you want to try lots of things and think about what's happening across the different colleges and what's happening in those connections to organizations that are offering relationships. For instance, I would just make one quick example of Tree People. So we've received at our center funding to work with Tree People because their expertise is in locating places and planting the trees. Our expertise at our center is working with communities to find out what they're doing. And so we would be running the workshops where people would then come and vote on where they want trees, and then Tree People takes it from there and participates directly in the planting activities. So there's lots of opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna agree with that, and it was great that you. Oh, there we go. Hello. Oh. I gotta turn on. No, I love the examples too, and it's funny that you brought them up because I got a ride back last week with the CEO of Tree People. So we were chatting about the new CEO. We were chatting about that, and I know the founder really well, and their past executive director was a great friend. So they do incredible, amazing work. I mean, I think as students. Like when I was a student, I was like already an activist. Like I was running this campaign about how we had this like crisis in the lending world and like with student loans. And I was like, this is insane. This thing's gonna like bankrupt us all. And I think I was like way ahead of my time because it didn't happen for another like 10, 15 years. But I've always been sort of interested in activism. But I think there are many like roles that students can play. So for instance, like just with the work that we do, I need a researcher right now who's interested in looking at all the money that we are generating from these sales tax and how we can reallocate it from building more freeways in the South Bay of Los Angeles to building more public transportation. And so somebody who can like look at all the tables and all the numbers and identify where this money is going and where it could potentially go and write a white paper would be incredibly useful right now. Or like if you're a researcher and that's your jam and you just want to like research stuff and are really good with data and spreadsheets, that's fantastic. That can be super useful. And doing analytics, I can't do all that stuff. Like that's somebody else I need to rely on. But then like we also need people to like show up, right? And there's many ways you can show up. Like we've got a conference in May 8th in Long Beach, and like we need volunteers who can like help out, register people. You can go to some of the conferences or some of the workshops and hear cool things happening. Like I'll also feed you. That's a good thing too. Everybody likes food. So like there's things like that, but then there's also like we need people to like show up at these hearings because there's all these public hearings and we're fighting like a street battle at this point. So we passed these big measures, we won these big battles, but we're now fighting like literally block by block on some of these projects where people are like, well, public transportation's cool, just not on my block. And we're seeing this throughout the region. It doesn't matter if you live, what's incredible, when I talk about diversity, you look at the 4,000 square miles of LA County. We have communities like Pear Blossom that don't even have paved roads. And then we have downtown Los Angeles with buildings that are, 100 stories, right? And so, like, we have such incredible diversity here and we have to kind of represent all that. that. And we have to be able to connect everybody also in the region as well. So I need like, people can just straight up show up and be like, yo, I want more transit right here, and I also want my house, my rent to be affordable. Thank you, and I brought 5 of my friends who are gonna also say the same thing, because we're fighting this battle for what the future of Los Angeles looks like. And again, like, you may see it a very different way than I might see it, and that's cool, and that's okay, and that's what's great about having 10 million people, 4,000 square miles, and communities that range from Malibu to downtown LA and Santa Clarita to Redondo Beach. I mean, we just have this beautiful diversity, and we can keep all of that, but we can also have a diversity of transportation options.
I want to, so I intentionally didn't talk about it because I just wanted to shed light on the positive role of businesses. But I encourage you to think about have a bit of like system thinking. So I don't know about the actual impact, but let's say planting trees through that kind of like partnership between businesses and NGOs in a certain underserved community, and maybe planting trees might drive the increase in rents. And then that might crowd out some of the natives who live in that neighborhood, like for instance. So like sometimes we intend to do something good, but sometimes it also generates some unintended consequences, which in economics that is referred to as the externalities. And so that's why instead of like seeing the phenomena that we have, like either it's about public goods or climate change or some sustainability issues or social issues, I want you to think about that kind of system thinking, that it's not a binary variable, whether it's that we do something good or we do something bad, but there are always some sort of gray areas that we need to pay attention to. So that's something that I always try to highlight in my class with my business students, that it's not about businesses are being responsible or being irresponsible. There are so many gray areas that companies can be in through their strategic behavior. So we need to probably think about it, and then the same message goes for the other probably non-business major students as well.
That is so true. You know, we wrote another ballot measure called Measure ULA that the business community and the real estate community really doesn't like because it taxes the sale of properties. We're in this like huge battle right now over the unintended consequences of that, to the point where we may have precipitated a major candidate, Nathan Rama, getting into the mayor's race, which is another unintended consequence, I guess, of the work that we're doing. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right, like all of these things are very complex. And we have to think of the implications. I mean, we have to think of the implications of like what putting like a bike path, you know, in the LA River might have for the riparian, right? And so like, yeah, they're you know, it's not so simple anymore.
Yeah, okay. So I think for students, I think, well, I guess, especially after a talk like today, I kind of feel like I can relate to that, because I feel like almost every day I show up and think, what am I doing? It's too complicated. There's just like too much going on here. And if you think about it, and a talk like this is so, we have people from such diverse backgrounds, that everything seems to be a key, you know, are addressing key points with the city that we all live. I think it reminds me, like, just start doing it. And you know, and you're going to find your path. Find something that's appealing to you right now, or maybe it's just something that's an opportunity that's easily accessible, and that can lead, you know, with an open mind, that can lead you in a lot of different places. You know, you might end up being a hydraulic engineer in Los Angeles, California, right? Which we do. Unfortunately, the affordability issue has taken a major toll on the number of at least federal employees that can work on this kind of project. So if I can be a little bit selfish, I would also say, consider developing expertise in hydraulic engineering and keeping that in Southern California, because we really need it here.
And I think another piece of advice that was very powerful to me as I was going through my professional development, and I'm approaching the horizon of 70 right now, so I've been doing this a long time, failing a lot of things, being successful at a few things, and so forth, is this Jesuit model that asks you these 3 fundamental questions. Is the students here are likely to live to be 100 years old, which means you can be professionally effective for 60 years. And so what is that 60-year arc of time going to look like? It's going to change. I did my doctoral dissertation on endangered species, but what became the critical aspect, some of it in very remote locations, it required helicopters to take me in, and it was delightful. But what emerged in my work in Massachusetts and then out here was the idea that we had artificially separated nature from humans, and that you either worked in one domain or the other. And in fact, as a graduate student, if you did urban ecology in the 1980s when I was in graduate school, that was a signal that you couldn't get a grant to go somewhere in 4 years. Right, so you're already a failure. You're already stuck in Joyce. Yeah, exactly. And so, but now, there's finally this recognition that we have to get to a relationship with humanity and the other living and animate subjects around us successfully integrated, because we are the dominant ecosystem engineers of the earth. And nature and humanity are one. These are co-evolved systems. And so we have to break down the binary, as you pointed out, a very important phrase. We have to move away from the binary and understand the complexity. So yes, when you plant trees, that could spool up gentrification with a large G, which is bad. But it also hastens gentrification with a small g, which means you're improving the environment for everyone. We can't let one set of successes deflect our attempts to understand the complexity of it. And you're an institution where this kind of complexity is understood. And one last point that I think is important. We're here celebrating the Laudato Si, and you have a group of scientists and technical people sitting here recognizing the other great challenge that we face, if I go back to my days in graduate school, is that we came to this uneasy recognition that the world of faith and the world of science could exist as co-magisterium, separated safely, maybe not bridges across, but we will keep those things separate. And we've made a lot of progress, but we also understand that bringing together these communities of belief and communities of data and communities of passion, when managed appropriately, are able to achieve so much more than if we keep ourselves separate. And that's one of the great powers of the
I would say I'm proof of that because my mom's a rabbi and my dad's a scientist, so I think that's absolutely right. You know, I would add one more thing to what you just said, because I graduated during the Great Recession in 2008, and it was pretty awful in 2009. But y'all are graduating with AI, and that's like freaky, right? But here's something to think about. ChatGPT can tell you how to plant a tree, but it can't actually plant a tree, right? ChatGPT could tell you maybe how to engineer, a river. No, it definitely can't. But it definitely should not. But also it can't build it, and that's what I love about the work that I'm doing is advocacy work and building infrastructure is not something that you can export. It's not something that can be done by AI. It really isn't something that should even be done by robots. It needs human input. And so I think that's something to really think about when you're thinking about your career is these are career opportunities that cannot be AI, at least remote.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank the four panelists. It was wonderful sitting here and knowing the different disciplines that you each come from. The interdisciplinary dialogue and the connections and the bridges we as audience could build as each of you talked was just mind-blowing. And along those lines, and based on the last comments, particularly that were made around the IBES and the thesis here, is this summer we have an incredible conference coming up on July 13th, 14th. July 13th for we will be having International Association of Jesuit Business Schools. Then we will be having tri-sector conference on tri-sector innovation and convening government officials, consul generals, corporate leaders, NGO leaders to talk about sustainability. And then we'll go right into the United Nations time at the PRME meeting talking about the Sustainable Development Goals. The reason I raised that is one of the things that will happen at that first conference is a special track on integrated ecology. And as I heard the four of you speaking, this is a joint initiative between the Institute of Business Ethics and Sustainability and Oxford University's Advocacy Center. And we're looking for tracks, and ideally students and faculty from different disciplines across the campus coming together and maybe think about submitting a paper, a white paper if you will, talking about what that integrated ecological approach could do in the spirit of bringing together the faith and science and business and tri-sector and all of those different things. Integrated ecology track, correct me if I'm wrong, that it will go mostly agri.
Not only, but that's a focus of the dimension of it, but also it would be beyond that.
And financial prizes for the best paper in the track. So, again, the importance of the sectors and how they influence. So, but anyway, thank you. I just so enjoyed it.
All right, thank you guys so much for your amazing presentations. On behalf of everyone, I would like to thank you guys for being here and taking time out of your day to share your experience and expertise with us. If everyone can give our amazing panelists a big round of applause.
And our student facilitators.
That concludes our event.
When I came